and I was also the district engineer for the Cumberland County Soil and Water Conservation District. Thanks for joining us.
So today we will cover everything stormwater from a regulatory standpoint. Types of stormwater, contaminants in stormwater, of which there are many, stormwater treatment and or storage options, what we're working on in our, both of our cities. We're doing a lot of the same things, but we're also doing a lot of our own stuff. Also, we're looking at climate change considerations because it affects everything we do. And I just wanted to put a plug in for the natural water cycle because it's all about the natural water cycle. First thing that you learn in grammar school. So this picture basically shows what is impervious area. What does it do? Impervious area is our developed landscape versus forests and fields. As you start adding more development, more pavement, more buildings, more parking lots, you start to see an increase in runoff. Less water can infiltrate into the ground and become groundwater. Less water evaporates up into the air and becomes clouds. So over time, as you see an area become more developed, you end up seeing a lot more runoff, a lot less evapotranspiration, and much less infiltration because that pavement gets in the way of the natural water cycle. So stormwater runoff. What is stormwater? Like I said, it's what runs off our landscape. And in communities like Portland and South Portland, we have three types of systems, pipes. We have stormwater management pipes, just separated stormwater carries just runoff. We have sanitary sewers, which carry just municipal and industrial waste, hopefully to the treatment plant. And then we have combined sewers, which are larger pipes that carry both wastewater and stormwater, hopefully to the treatment plant.
And I'll make a note that both of our cities have spent millions and millions of dollars trying to reduce those combined sewer overflows. None of us want to have untreated sewage going into water bodies. So what we do is we'll do what's called a separation project, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a future slide. So I was going to mention a couple things about stormwater management. So when I think of stormwater management and I'm talking to a group of people about it, I want people to know that stormwater management really encapsulates a lot of different functions. We do look at flooding, but we actually spend a lot of time looking at erosion and sedimentation control. We look at pollution prevention. As Doug mentioned, one of the requirements we have is to do stormwater treatment. So when we have a new project and there's runoff that'll come from that project, how much of that can we treat? How much of it can we keep on site to mimic the natural landscape, like Doug was mentioning? Maine has a very robust state level review program. Maine DEP reviews the stormwater approach for the stormwater treatment approach for projects that essentially have an acre of impervious area or more. There's a little bit of some nuances to that in some cases, but we have a very robust state review program. And we also both of our cities have a really robust local review program. We're both involved in that for new development and redevelopment. Inspection and maintenance is a huge portion, and really this should probably be a bigger slice of this pie wedge. It doesn't do any good to anyone to spend tons of money designing sites with elaborate stormwater treatment systems and spending tons of money on engineering and then not maintain those systems and have them fail. So that's something we want to avoid. If we don't maintain those systems, they don't continue to function as intended. So overall, stormwater management has a lot of different pieces. One I missed is natural resource protection. Both of our cities have a really rigorous program to try to reduce wetland impacts. And when we have to do wetland impacts, making sure that we're trying to compensate for that somehow. So Doug mentioned that there's different types of stormwater management, and there's a couple acronyms we're probably going to use or that you're going to hear in other presentations or see in other documents. So we'll start with, these are all number one, by the way. All of these are number one. Every single one of these is the most important. That I did not notice in my QA/QC. Sorry. The first one we'll talk about is municipal stormwater management. This is called an MS4 permit. So there are more than 30 different towns in the state of Maine that are subject to the MS4 permit. And that happens as a combination of population density, and how close you are to other developed urbanized areas. Both Portland and South Portland are MS4 communities. You're going to hear us use the term MS4 later in the presentation. The next number one, this is looking at site development. This is a land use type of stormwater management. When we have a property and someone wants to do a development on it, whether it's a subdivision or a single family home or anything in between, we have to look at what kind of water is coming off that property now, and if that development happens the way it's proposed, how much stormwater is going to come off that property once it's developed. How do we minimize the difference? How do we keep as much water on site as possible? Maine DEP has a couple different permit programs that guide us in that. There's the stormwater law for medium-sized projects. There's site location of development, which we call site law for larger projects. All of these projects have to comply with the Natural Resources Protection Act, or NERPA. And then some projects also trigger Army Corps if the wetland impact is significant enough. The third type of stormwater is industrial. Maine DEP has a program called MSGP, which is Multi-Sector General Permit. So you'll have industries in different categories. So for example, seafood processing is one. Timber processing is one. Scrap metal recycling is one. And there are something like 40 something different sectors. So if an industry has functions in that sector, Maine DEP says, we want to talk to you, learn a little bit more about what's going on outside your building that is exposed to stormwater. What kind of potential pollutants do you have outside? How do you manage vehicles on your site so that we don't have oil spills and things like that? So that's the third type of stormwater. The fourth one is construction stormwater management. This is called the MCGP, the Maine Construction General Permit, and this essentially is pushed down to the state at the federal level. This applies to any project that has an acre or more of disturbed area. Whether it's going to go back to vegetated when you're done or not, it doesn't matter. If you're going to have an acre of soil open to the rainfall to potentially be eroded, the project has to meet this. Both of our cities manage projects smaller than 1 acre. We look at single family home lots and we manage erosion and construction on those properties as well. So I want to just kind of go through those 4 types of stormwater permits. And here's how those are managed at the state level. So the Maine DEP Water Bureau, they handle the construction general permit and site law, stormwater, and NERPA. Sorry, the Land Bureau manages those two. And then the Water Bureau manages the MS4 permit and the industrial stormwater permit. Something you'll hear us talk about. So something I just noticed here too is I have these logos reversed. Blue is Water Bureau because water is blue. Land is the orangish one. So apologies for that. When you hear people talk about Chapter 500, which we do a lot in a lot of presentations and discussions, Chapter 500 is Maine DEP's Stormwater Rule Chapter. That lays out to designers, developers, engineers, here are how we want you to look at your sites. Here's how we want you to try to mimic the natural hydrology of your site as much as possible. When you have to add stormwater treatment, here are the guidelines we want you to follow. Here's the bars you have to hit for treatment for both impervious areas and areas that maybe you're changing from wooded to meadow. So you're changing it. It's still going to be vegetated, but it's a less vigorous type of vegetation. So Chapter 500, if you've heard other presentations, that's how that fits into it. That's the DEP Land Bureau.
And if I might just jump in there, I just want to point out, this acknowledges the fact that what we do on the landscape affects our water, and what we do with our water affects our landscape. It's a very, very difficult process to coordinate at a regulatory level, and that cascades down to our municipal level. So it's a very challenging, because so many different things can affect water and so many different things that we do with water can affect land. It really is a challenging overlapping regulatory framework we're dealing with.
Well said.
So what are some of the common stormwater pollutants? Um, Trash and debris is something we typically see. Pet waste is an emerging one, and communities like Portland and South Portland, which have a lot of public parks and walking trails, some great byways. Pet waste is an issue because either people are not picking it up or they are picking it up in a bag, but they don't necessarily want to put it in a trash can or bring it home. So they throw it in a storm drain or they simply throw it in a ditch or into the woods. Pet waste contains a lot of pollutants and bacteria, which are not healthy for us or our pets. Sewage, something that the city of Portland is struggling to try to keep out of our water. Um, Oil and any other petroleum products and lubricants that either come off our vehicles or that we're using in for various purposes. Uh, what are we doing on our lawns and at our businesses? Using pesticides to deal with all sorts of things and fertilizers. Fertilizers are nutrients. They can cause problems in our water, whether it be fresh or salt water. And then one we wouldn't think about, it's road salt and the salt we put down on our driveways. A lot of our streams are becoming challenged by this. Freshwater streams want to be freshwater. If you're a freshwater fish or if you're a frog, you're not a big fan of salt water. So if a lot of salt runs off the landscape and gets into the water and into the groundwater, that can affect our streams and our rivers and can affect everything that lives in them. Not to
And I'll
mention
just,
I was just going to say it's extraordinarily corrosive to our
it sure
bridges and
is.
vehicles and everything.
And something that's different about salt as compared to the other items on this list, we can treat or address most of these. We can remove trash. Sewage, there's a way to treat sewage and get it out of the water. Pet waste, nutrients, we can treat nutrients with stormwater treatment BMPs. We can't treat salt. Once salt is in a fresh water, you can't really get it out. There are engineered systems like reverse osmosis systems or membrane microfiltration that can remove salt, but they're so expensive we don't even use them for drinking water. So we certainly can't design and install those types of systems to treat fresh waters that have too much conductivity, that have too much salinity in them. So salt is a little bit different in that the only thing we can really do with salt is prevent it. So a couple slides from now, Doug's going to talk a little bit about how both of our cities are working to reduce how much salt we're putting down in the first place. And Maine DOT and Maine Turnpike Authority are doing the same thing under their permits. I'll also say that we are trying to work with private landowners as well, so that private contractors are educated on what they can do before a storm starts, let's just say, to reduce how much salt they have to put down during the storm. So we'll come back to salt in a few minutes. Bottom of the slide, and I probably can't hear all of you when you talk, but does anybody have any guesses about the number one pollutant? Oh, you can yell it into the void if you want. Oh, Doug, wow, this is not fair because you get to show people in the next slide what it is.
It's sediment running off of our landscape. Whenever we disturb the soil, open it up so that it can become exposed to runoff, rain or snow melt, you can end up with sediment moving off of your site. Whether it moves directly into a stream or into a river or right off the coast into the ocean, or whether it goes through our municipal separate storm sewer system, through our catch basins, or even through the treatment plant, through our combined system. Sediment, if you ever look at Casco Bay after a really heavy rainstorm, you will notice it becomes kind of brown along the coastline, and that's because of sediment moving off our landscape. Sediment has a lot of impacts on the natural environment, and it also can convey any nutrients and any other pollutants that are attached to it or that it picks up along the way. So in areas where there's been pasture or farmland, nitrogen and phosphorus bind to those soil particles and can get washed in, and they can contribute to harmful algae blooms in fresh or marine waters. Um, petroleum products, especially the clay particles, which we have a lot of clay in coastal Maine. Those clay particles will pick up heavy metals, they'll pick up petroleum products, and they'll just hang on to them, and they will settle out into the um, watery environment eventually, along with those pollutants, creating a less healthful situation for those water bodies.
And a lot of people, when we do presentations, are kind of surprised to learn that soil is the biggest pollutant, but it is because it can bind to so many things, like Doug just very well described.
So we have under our MS4, a municipal storms, separate storm sewer system permit. That's always a tongue twister. We have 6 minimum control measures that we are responsible for working on, and we build that into our permit and our programs. And every year we continue to add a little bit more to how we do this, but it involves public outreach, which we're doing a lot of in our schools. We partner with the Cumberland County Soil and Water Conservation District to do some of that outreach and education because they have wonderful programs. And we try to get in as early as possible into the elementary schools to teach kids about these, to supplement what they're learning in school so that they can understand that they can be part of the solution. They can be part of the change that needs to occur to protect our water. And they also are really good at teaching the adults. It's amazing. Um, Public involvement. So once you learn about it, what do you do with that knowledge? You get involved, whether it be stream cleanups, whether it be going out and doing storm drain stenciling projects with your school or with the scouts. All of these things help to share that message and help improve water quality little bit at a time because every little bit truly does help. And kind of getting back to our kinds of pollutants, it's always easier to do pollution prevention and a lot more cost effective to do pollutant prevention than it is to try to put in a multi-million-dollar stormwater management or treatment system after the fact, or to try to pull it out of the water after it's already in it. Um, Illicit discharge detection and elimination. These are very important programs because we have hundreds of years of pipes underground. So things happen. We end up with cross connections between our combined or our sewer systems and our storm drains. Sometimes people will purposefully dump stuff into the storm drains. Um, we have to, if we find something at a stormwater outfall, dumping into a brook or a river or the water, we have procedures which we use to go and trace it back to its source and then address that source, depending on what it is. Sometimes it requires a capital project, sometimes it requires a fine. There's lots of different ways of getting at it, but it's very time consuming and can be very expensive. Construction site stormwater runoff control, that erosion sedimentation control that Aubrey was talking about at our construction sites. Really, really important because remember, sediment is the #1 pollutant, and it's probably one of the biggest pollutants that comes off of our construction sites. Post-construction stormwater runoff control, that involves encouraging, incentivizing, and requiring public and private property during development and redevelopment to install stormwater management controls. That will help deal with some of the existing problems that we have with stormwater runoff, but also new development where you're going to greenfield sites. It helps to reduce the volume and the pollutant level coming off of those sites. And finally, something that is real challenge is good housekeeping and pollution prevention at all of our operations. And when we teach, we are training all of our staff to be aware, to keep their eyes open, and to understand that everything they do throughout their daily workday can potentially cause stormwater pollution, whether it's something as simple as filling up their equipment, whether it's applying fertilizers and pesticides, and that's a different story we'll talk about a little bit later, whether it's doing some level of construction, painting, all of those kinds of things can contribute to stormwater pollution if we're not paying attention and not trying to prevent that. And then on top of all that, we have for our water bodies that are determined to not meet water quality standards or impaired water bodies, we are required under our permit to develop several best management practices, which basically could be a pollution prevention type of system or an actual management system, such as put in a rain garden somewhere within each of our impaired water bodies. We have projects that we have to do related to that.
The photo on this screen, I put in, I didn't even tell Doug I was putting this in, but it looks familiar to him, I'm pretty sure. I mentioned that something that our communities have to do, all the MS4 communities have to do is we have to work with our public works departments to educate the drivers about good practices when, how to, when to sand, when to salt, when to pre-treat, but also make sure that our trucks are calibrated so that the driver knows that when the truck is on a certain setting, they know how many pounds of salt per lane mile are being put down. So I'm not sure it happens every year, but I think it happens at least every other year. And the example that we have here in this photo, this is one of the city of Portland's trucks that has been calibrated. So this is one of the more challenging elements, right? Because you somehow, there's things that you can control, things you can't control. Our truck drivers have a huge amount of, they have a lot of knowledge about certain roadways under certain conditions, and they have a feeling sometimes that they know how much salt needs to get put down. We have to respect that and we have to work with that, but also do our best to try to get them to adapt to some of these newer technologies. Something else I'll mention when we talk about municipal operations, this includes everything from fire departments to police departments to parks and recs departments. So there's a level of training and outreach that all of our communities, both of our communities, all the MS4 communities have to do with each of those departments. We'll come back to that in a little bit. Oh, my slide is not clicking forward. There we go. Doug, this is still you.
Okay, so what are examples of stormwater treatment? You can look at the traditional, okay, you've got a catch basin with a pipe and then it goes out. That's not being treated. So any pollution that's coming off the landscape that enters that catch basin is not being treated. There are a variety of different, what we call gray infrastructure, traditional types of things that will help remove trash, floatable materials, sediment. But then we have more modern green stormwater infrastructure types of things that we're putting in now. And they include a plant and or a soil biological mechanism. We have tree box filters that are simply a large container with soil and trees or shrubs or other plants in it that will collect some of that stormwater, screen out the trash and sediment, and as the water works its way down through the soil, the microorganisms and the plant roots will work on trying to remove some of those pollutants and hopefully keep the plants healthy. Bioinfiltration cells are another common way. That is a way of grabbing it on. I think there's a good example over there where essentially what you're doing is it's like a tree box filter without the tree box. And essentially it's a depression with soil in it and plants that allows runoff to flow into it. It's treated and slowed down and absorbed by that. And when you have infiltration, it actually goes into the ground, become part of groundwater, cleaner than when it went in. And then we have an underdrain soil filter, which is similar, except for it is lined so that the water can't go into the ground. It goes back out into the storm drain system before being discharged, hopefully cleaner than when it went in. Wet ponds are a larger scale treatment, so it allows you to capture water from a larger area and hold on to it and then slowly treat it before it's discharged. And then we have porous pavement, which is, it can be either concrete, asphalt, or even pavers, where essentially the surface is porous enough but solid enough to park on or drive on, but it's porous and essentially water will flow down into that, go into a filter media underneath, and then either discharges to the ground or goes through an under drain system to the storm drain system. But that filter media, it helps to reduce the overall volume of runoff, and it helps provide treatment.
I'll make a note too that the last two on this list, wet ponds and porous pavement, also can provide storage. So each one of these items does treatment. Each one of these types of systems will do treatment. Wet ponds are designed so that they do treatment and they can provide storage during large storm events. And porous pavement is often designed so that it has a very large stone reservoir or even perhaps some plastic chambers underneath it. So water is going through that soil filter media, like Doug said, but then it's also being stored and then bled back into the system or bled back into an outlet as the storm subsides and the stream can take it. Another thing I'll mention is you may look at this list and you say porous pavement. Well, that doesn't sound very green. Well, the reason that porous pavement is something that we're probably going to be talking about much more is because it is one of the only stormwater treatment technologies that mimics natural hydrology. We talked about thinking about a site. If you have an existing undeveloped site, water is soaking into the ground. It's a forest or it's a meadow. It's very porous. It's very pervious. If you're developing that into buildings and pavement and sidewalks and roof areas, you're reducing the amount of area that can soak up that water. Well, porous pavement can soak up water. So yes, it's pavement, but it's acting much more like the pre-development land surface in a way that it's not sending as much runoff off into a water body. If you are familiar with the main mall area, one of the biggest porous pavement projects it's the biggest in the state. It's one of the biggest in New England. Is in front of the main mall on Main Mall Road, and it runs from kind of the vitamin shop down just past Starbucks. So it's the Best Buy side of the mall. Drive out there sometime when it's raining, and if you're driving from, let's say you're coming from the airport and you're heading toward Scarborough, you'll notice there's water on the road. There's water spraying up. There's water spraying. You get to that section and there's no water ponded. It's dry. And that's because that water is going through that surface. The extra benefit of having porous pavement like that is because you don't have water ponding on the surface, you're reducing the chance of there being freezing. So you won't have a layer of ice. You won't have to treat it with salt. So if porous pavement is maintained properly, which it actually has to get vacuumed, it's giant trucks with huge engines on them that vacuum the teeny little particles out of the porous pavement. That has to happen or it just becomes pavement. But when it's maintained properly, it can really reduce how much salt we have to put down to maintain a safe driving surface.
It's also important to note that every type of stormwater treatment comes with maintenance costs and eventually replacement or repair costs. So as I mentioned earlier, it's always better to try to prevent pollution than it is to have to manage it. Because there are costs, long-term costs for managing these things that we have to factor in. And we are learning about these as we go along.
Well said. So Robin asked us to talk a little bit about flood control in this presentation. And, we can do that a little bit from a climate change perspective. So how is climate change affecting what Doug and I and all the other MS4 stormwater program coordinators have to do? Well, there are certain things that we do see. We see rainfall intensity increasing. That doesn't necessarily always mean a bigger storm, but it means when the rain starts, it comes down super fast. It comes down really hard. We design pipes a certain way for a certain volume, but water has to get into those pipes. And when water comes down so fast on a surface, it may be higher than the ability to get into the pipe. So we have flooding issues. So rainfall intensity, even if the storm itself doesn't deliver a ton of water, how fast the rain comes down can really pose a problem. We are seeing more frequent large storm events. So from a design standpoint, we look at a storm's return frequency. Is it a 2-year storm? Is it a 5-year storm, 10-year storm, 100-year storm? 100-year storm means that the size of that storm, there's like 1% chance of having that storm event in a given year, or less than that really. So it's a big, high number of inches of rain that comes down. Well, when we look at the charts and the tables that show us how to design these systems, what we see is county by county, we're seeing 100-year storm rainfall events. How much rain comes down in a 24-hour period? We're seeing way more 100-year storms. For those of you who have been in Maine a long time, if you recall back in, I think it was 2004 and 2005, we had the Mother's Day storm and the Patriots' Day storm back to back in 2 years. They were both 100-year storms, and they occurred in 2 adjacent years. So those are things that we didn't plan for 50 years ago when the systems in place now were designed, or 30 years ago when they were installed. What that means is that there are areas that can't drain as fast as we would like them to. The photos on here are from both of our communities. On the bottom left, we can see Portland. So there's 2 different areas that we show here. The top left picture, that is from Commercial Street in Portland. I think we've all seen the news coverage of Jay's Oyster Bar and people walking up to their waist. That's happening more and more now because of king tides. So king tides are extreme high tide events. When those coincide with storm events and or storms that have a lot of wind, it's even worse. It exacerbates it far more. The other Portland picture we have here is down closer to Marginal Way. And I think, again, we've probably seen the news coverage of people kayaking at Whole Foods, right? On the right-hand side, we see a storm event from 2 years ago in South Portland that created flooding near one of our big school areas. And the other image I have for South Portland, and Julie Rosenbach is on this call, and the planning folks on this call are like, that looks kind of familiar. This is part of a separate project that the city of South Portland has worked on. The sustainability office is heading that up. They have done mapping to look at sea level rise, right? Sea level rise and where that's going to affect different parts of our city. So what does this mean to us? Well, you know what? Sometimes this really doesn't mean anything to us. Stormwater, water treatment plants, stormwater systems, they're at the low elevation. They're at the point that water is going to flow to. We can't really move them. They're at the low point. It's going to continue to be the low point, even if sea level increases. So to some extent, we really can't do much about this from a stormwater standpoint at the low point. One of the things we can do is insist that with new development and redevelopment, that those projects, whatever the post-development, whatever the proposed project is, needs to not send additional water into our systems. We need to keep all their stormwater on site. Is that going to increase construction costs? Yes, and that's a challenge. And a lot of developers say that's not fair to make us put in these storage systems and these subsurface chamber systems. They're expensive. I can't do my project if I have to do that. So that is part of that balance that has to happen between economic development and stormwater management. So I just wanted to talk about the fact that really, to a large extent, water is going to flow to the low point, and that's where our systems already are. So we really can't do that much about that from that standpoint. So now we're going to talk a little bit about, and we're about halfway through our presentation. So actually, I think we're doing really good time-wise. We're more than halfway through our presentation. We're getting toward the sort of like the meat of the slides. There's a couple things that activities and practices that both Portland and South Portland are doing, and I'm going to cover some of those, and then Doug's going to cover some of those. So both of our communities, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, are and have been reducing how much water we have in our combined sewers. We don't want to have water and stormwater and sewage in the same pipe. We want to be separating them. And I can say I happen to know this. In the last 10 years, the city of South Portland has reduced our CSO volume, how much volume we send out into into Casco Bay or the Fore River, by 95%. So that's a huge amount of flow that we've been captured, but it's also very expensive. Talk about expensive. The picture on the bottom left is something that you've probably seen if you didn't, even if you didn't know what you were looking at. This is along 295 in Portland, along Baxter Boulevard, and it's one of the combined sewage storage tanks that the city of Portland has had to put in. The others were under Baxter Boulevard. What these incredibly huge tanks do is they, during a storm event, combined sewer systems flow into them. They're huge underground tanks. So those tanks fill up during that storm event. Okay, rather than letting that water go into the back cove, or in our case, letting it go into the Fore River. Then what happens as the storm slows down is Portland Water District's East End wastewater treatment plant sends a signal to the tank. It's all connected with very elaborate technology. Portland Water District's plant says, we can take more flow. So the gates in this tank slowly open up, and all that combined sewage, it's stormwater and sewage that previously would have gone into the bay, is now going to go to the East End plant. This is million. Do you know how many millions of gallons this is?
It's 3.5
Talking
million gallons. And believe it or not, under certain circumstances, like really intense rain events after, if we've had several days of rain and we get a really intense event, it can fill within a half an hour, believe it or not. But what it's doing is it's preventing multiple overflows at various points, because when we installed this, we connected multiple systems that were discharging at multiple points to the back cove. And remember
So
those,
3.5 million gallons in 30 minutes.
yeah. So those combined sewer overflows are really pressure relief valves, because until 1979, all of our wastewater went out to the bay. That was just the way it was. Then they created a connector sewer system and built the treatment plant, and that went online in 1979. So we finally started having treatment. But we continued to grow and we continued to create more impervious area and more industrial and municipal waste. And that continued to overwhelm the system. Not only was it causing flooding and backups, but it was actually physically damaging the system. So we created these designed pressure relief valves, which we call combined sewer overflows. And that kind of wasn't helping, because the intent was to get it to the treatment plant and clean it up. So now we're dealing with the challenges of having an undersized system of conveyances to the treatment plant. And not only that, I'll just throw in really quickly that lack of maintenance over the years. I mean, because this system, some of our pipes are 100 years old or more, and the conveyance system isn't exactly new at this point. Getting sediment, trash, debris, roots, and everything else out of that system is restoring capacity. And we're spending a lot of time doing that too.
Time and money. I don't even know how much the back cove tank was. Do you know?
I don't, and I don't know if anybody wants to know, but it was more than originally envisioned, because there were a lot of technical challenges in trying to implement it.
It's a huge amount of money. So the back cove tank is an example of increasing storage capacity in the system. On the right-hand side is a sort of a different approach. And this is something that South Portland is working on. Pearl Street is our biggest sewage pump station. It treats probably 80%, 75%. It captures 75% of the flow from the South Portland. So it's all the mall area plus Broadway and a lot, it covers a huge amount of South Portland. So we have a combined sewer overflow long-term control plan. Maine DEP says, tell us how you're going to continue. You've made great progress about reducing your combined sewer overflow number and volume, but you got to keep going. Well, this is the next big project for us. Pearl Street Pump Station is old. It's got electrical issues. It's got safety issues. It also has one force main that goes under the Fore River to pump sewage over to our treatment plant, which you can see on the right-hand side of the image there. Well, we don't like just having that one force main pipe under Fore River. What if it fails? So what we're doing is we're upgrading the pump stations. Well, we're not upgrading it. We're building a new pump station. We've already purchased the land. The project has been designed. We estimate a $50 million project. We are going to have to, bond this. This is a lot of money for South Portland. We're going to have to bond this, so it will increase sewer rates. We're trying to do that very respectfully in several different phases because we understand that can be a challenge for our sewer users. But this is also something that we have to do. DEP says you must do this. So upgrading our pump stations to increase how much they can store and how much they can send to our treatment plants is a big part of water quality protection because it's reducing how much untreated sewage gets into these water bodies, but it is not cheap. $50 million is a lot of money for our community, for any community, really. And again, this is almost all of the older cities, Augusta, Bangor, all the bigger, larger cities, and even some of the smaller ones are all dealing with combined sewer overflows and being required to reduce this. Something else that both of our cities are doing, and we talked a little bit about this already, we talked about using green infrastructure. So green infrastructure is essentially, and Doug talked about this a bit, it's trying to use vegetation and mimic a natural environment, but using vegetation to do a couple things, to do treatment, to remove nutrients. Nutrients make the plants grow. Then we harvest, we cut the plants, and then we can compost the harvested plants. Those nutrients then no longer get into the water body, right? But the other thing plants do is they evapotranspire water. So when we have plants that are happy with wet feet, I like to say, being in a wet environment, those plants thrive under those conditions. They pull up some of that water and they send it back into in the environment. It is measurable. You might think, well, that can't make a big difference. It absolutely can. And the new Chapter 500 rules are making us do more of this. So on the left-hand side, you'll see photos from a couple of the City of Portland's sewer separation projects where we're taking what was a combined system and we're taking the stormwater, putting it into this area and putting the sewage into this area. Those are ways that we will treat those separated areas. So treat the stormwater that previously was going into the combined system. Similarly, on the right-hand side, you'll see two projects that South Portland has done. Main Street and Simmons Road, you'll see they're actually Simmons Road and Main Street, but if you're driving on Main Street in South Portland, you'll see a number of esplanades between the roadway and the sidewalk where we are using vegetation to intercept what's flowing off the road, do some treatment, soak into the ground. If it's a big storm, it does go into our pipe, but we're still intercepting a portion of that and doing treatment where it wasn't happening before.
And
The
it
other thing
slows
that,
down how quickly some of that water gets into our systems, which takes some pressure off the pipes during heavy rain situations. So every little
exactly
bit we
right.
can take out of the combined system or the stormwater system during big rain events is more capacity that pipe has to convey it to its outfall or to the treatment plant.
Exactly right. Something else that both of our cities are doing, we talked about illicit discharges. These can be obvious things like someone dumping their, wash water into a catch basin or throwing their pet waste, into a catch basin. Sometimes they're not easy to find, and it's a lot of money and time. Both of our cities do water quality monitoring. We look at catch basins in South Portland. You'll see me out there in my little Mini Cooper with a license plate H2O doing this at different spots in the city during different times when I'm trying to capture certain storm events. Both of us have elaborate camera systems in trucks where we're sending cameras down the pipes constantly. And then we use technologies like dye testing and smoke testing to figure out places where we may have sanitary systems connected into the stormwater systems. The last thing both of us do is investigate citizen reports or complaints, and we'll talk about that. I think we probably only have a couple, I think we probably have like maybe 8 more minutes or so, if that works for you guys, and then have time for questions. That includes time for questions. So Doug, here's a list you have to go through real fast, pretty much, of lots of other
So,
stuff that we're doing.
okay. So we mentioned erosion control and sediment control at construction sites. We're doing regular inspections. We have to do 3 inspections during the lifetime of each project, large and small. And as Aubrey mentioned, we're actually looking at smaller projects because sometimes those small projects can be problematic. We are providing training to our Public Works Department and all of our other departments on pollution prevention and good housekeeping. We have both put together, South Portland's a leader and Portland followed on this, developing pesticide and fertilizer ordinances to try to reduce the amount of pesticides and fertilizers that get into our water. We're working with our crews at Public Works and Parks and Rec in our case to reduce the amount of salt and to use best practices that reduce the amount of salt waste in handling so that there's less salt getting into our freshwater systems. We're implementing and updating stormwater pollution prevention plans for our municipal facilities that are our larger municipal facilities. We have identified the potential sources of pollutant and the kind of things that we're doing related to all of our activities and identified best management practices for trying to prevent pollution at those facilities, such as public works facilities, transfer stations, and so on. We're providing a lot of outreach and education about pet waste at a variety of different places. In our case, the Quarry Run Dog Park in Portland is a prime example of where we're working. We're managing stormwater treatment best management practices on private property. So whenever a developer puts in stormwater management, they now have to provide an annual report. So we are reviewing and working with the landowners to make sure that they are maintaining their stormwater treatment systems, because as Aubrey mentioned, if they aren't working, they aren't providing the benefits that they were approved to have. We're maintaining detailed maps of our stormwater and our sewer systems and constantly updating that through our GIS. And whenever we go out and we find a cross connection or a problem, we can actually go in and repair those things and then update our maps. We're going out and talking with school groups, community organizations, and having other events such as Earth Day festivals. We had Maine Clean Water Week the week before last, where we had multiple events. We had storm drain stenciling. We worked with the Portland Water District to go out and do that. We go out and talk with other community groups. I go to Lyman Moore School every year. So those are some of the
We have
things that we
April
do.
Stools Day. I think some of you have come to April
Oh,
Stools
yes.
Day
Yeah.
and talked with us at that. And I wanted to say that, the image on the right-hand side, that's a survey that we have to do as part of our MS4 permit. All of the MS4 towns have to do this. We have to look at certain areas and do a survey where we find pet waste. And right there is one snapshot, one day at Willard Beach, 38 piles of pet waste that were not picked up. They were all unbagged. So we survey those. We have an app. We take a picture of each one and it gets geolocated and we have to report that to the state. We have to demonstrate to the state that we are changing the behavior of people in our community. So this is a major effort and we have to do it. The other thing I'll mention, private properties. Before the call, Doug and I were talking about this. We're in the thick of this right now. He has 200 or so private properties that he needs to get annual reports from. I have a little more than 150. So it's a major effort. South Portland, what else are we doing? Well, we're working on some new ordinances for low impact development, which is not the same thing as green infrastructure. That's a whole different presentation we can do some other time. But we're also updating some existing ones, stormwater performance standards. We need to I think, reflect some changes in technology and also mirror how the state is looking at things a little bit better. I talked about Willard Beach. We do a ton of work at Willard Beach. That is continuing. The map on the right-hand side shows the subcatchments that go to Willard Beach. And again, that's what you'll see me out there sampling sometime in different points of that system to kind of get a sense of what we have going on where. We are also continuing to look for ways to improve stream crossings. Trout Brook, many of you guys know Trout Brook. There's 5 different culverts that are undersized or just not passable for habitat. We're working on a project with that right now. And we also work really closely with other cities and towns on their streams that cross our boundaries.
So what is Portland doing? We're doing a lot, if you can't guess. In 2016, we developed and implemented a stormwater service charge and credit program to help fund our stormwater programs and provide capital money for capital projects that we're doing, including green stormwater infrastructure, separation, and so on. Basically, we charge for impervious cover. And we recognize that there's a disconnect between how we charge for sewer and how we charge for stormwater. Um, when you charge for sewer, you're charging for the amount of water that's metered going into the house, assuming a water in equals water out to the treatment plant. That doesn't work for stormwater. When we looked at our stormwater ordinance, we basically figured it's the impervious area that's causing the problem. It's the runoff that's being generated. So we basically created this program to incentivize people to either reduce the amount of impervious cover that they own or to provide management and treatment for it. And the credit part of it allows them to get credit, a significant amount of credit, for doing what they would have to do during development or redevelopment. It's been very helpful. We've updated our land use ordinances during our recent recode process. And the goal with that is to provide better stormwater management on both new and redevelopment sites, which takes pressure off both of our both of our sewer systems. And we've already developed and implemented a low impact development ordinance and technical standards to go along with that, including a scoring tool that provides a lot of different ways for both greenfield development and redevelopment sites to improve water quality that's coming off and the amount of water that's coming off of their sites.
It's
Very
really
handy
great. You
tool.
guys did a great job with that, and we're going to probably steal from it or borrow from it.
Go for it, and thank you. Um, we just recently finished updating our Capissic Brook Watershed Management Plan, which the original one was back in 2012 when we implemented a number of elements of that, but a lot has changed on the ground since 2012. So we are adapting, we are looking at what are we dealing with now and what are the new challenges that we have to deal with within this watershed. And we've been doing a lot of studies to set us up for doing watershed management planning in Dole Brook, and then in the future, Nason's Brook and Fall Brook. So, for example, we've done some we're doing some specific conductance monitoring. We looked at habitat and stream channel effects throughout the watershed. So basically the hydrology and what's going on in these watersheds. What are the challenges? And that will set us up well for coming up with an approach to start turning the hands of time back and managing things into the future. And then in Capissic Brook watershed, we actually created, we did a stormwater retrofit project, which is our largest retrofit project of over 30 units of green stormwater infrastructure, mostly under drain soil filters. And we did those throughout this watershed. And that was a pretty amazing thing. And
One slide after this one.
okay,
I'm just about done.
so as I mentioned, sometimes it's better to manage the impervious cover. Sometimes it's better not to develop areas, particularly those areas that haven't been developed, usually because they are either wetland or in places that get wet, floodplains, things like that. So we had an opportunity to purchase 42 and a half acres at the headwaters of Capissic Brook off of Warren Avenue. That included a section of the brook and a whole bunch of headwater wetlands. So for a relatively small amount of money, we protected those. And now we don't have to put additional money into maintaining and repairing and replacing infrastructure that would have been needed to manage those 42 and a half acres. That's money in the bank in the long run. We also reconnected the brook to its headwater wetlands through another separation project under our sewer abatement programs, CSO abatement program. We worked with our Land Bank Commission to protect 30 acres of headwater wetlands up behind Portland Arts and Technical High School, Casco Bay High School, at the headwaters of this little brook. And then at the other end, closer to Riverside Street, another 27 and a half acres. And these were lands that the city already owned. So putting them in protection is, again, it's a cost that we're not incurring. It's money that we're not going to be adding to the tax base. Or to our fees and funds to maintain and try to protect something that got damaged. Not to mention, these are places, if we were to put development, they would be potentially subject to flooding. And that's not helping the situation by knowingly putting development in a place that could, with climate change, be a problem. And
We
then
only have 2
finally, we
minutes left, so I'm
restored,
gonna, I think we gotta skip ahead because we only have 2 minutes left in the whole
okay,
presentation.
we restored a buffer along Dole Brook at the golf course. So,
All right, wrapping it up. What can you do in your own neighborhood? So engage with your neighbors, okay? Yes, you can absolutely call us and report complaints, and you should. At the bottom of this slide, I've included the links for both Portland's and South Portland's, response systems. Please report it. But engage with your neighbors. Talk to them about what you see. Use some of the information that you can get from the Conservation District's Yardscape program to help give them ideas about what they could do to their yard instead of fertilizing their grass, right? Which again, is sort of different topic. If you see someone on the beach, if you're taking your dog on the beach and you see someone not pick up after the pet waste, walk over to them, say, hey, I have an extra bag. Do you want it? I will give you rolls of pet waste bags. Come see me. If you're willing to talk to your neighbors and work with your neighbors, I will print any of the materials that I have and give them to you. I'll give you rolls of pet waste bags. And just be a good steward. That's what you can do. And engage with your neighbors as much as you can. So we left you 1 minute for questions, and I'm so sorry.
Alrighty. Thank you all so much for an amazing and incredibly thorough presentation. I know some people have to hop off at 10. Feel free to do that if you need to. We'll do 5 to 10 minutes right now if anybody has quick questions. That said, email us at sustainability@portlandmaine.gov, and we will forward those questions to Aubrey and Doug if we run out of time and we can't answer your question. But thank you so much. That was so fantastic. So does anybody
I'll
have
send you a
questions?
copy of this. I'll send you a copy of this once I fix those numbering issues and the color of those.
Awesome. And it will also be recorded. So I'll stop the recording now and we'll do questions. And feel free to come off of mute if you have a question.
Yeah,
I don't know how
Carly.
to stop sharing. Sorry.